Hello and welcome to episode 16 of Ask Lovecraft After Dark, our special gaming edition. We are joined by Molly Tanzer, who now has the absolute honor of being our very first repeat guest.
Oh, is that true? Yay.
Yay! Thank you for coming back on, Molly.
It's my pleasure. I'm sorry the toad has decided to be here too, but he's being
The
very
toad,
insistent.
the toad is always welcome here.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it.
For folks who are so unfortunate as to be unaware, Molly Tanzer is a writer, an editor, and a practical spellcaster. And we are going to be talking about gaming, and we're also going to be talking about one of our upcoming books, Creatures of Want and Ruin. But Molly and I we've had a chance to game together, which is why I thought this would be fun to kind of bring the intersection of, the literary world, which is kind of a lot of what we deal with. But we've been also talking with a lot of game designers, LARP runners. We chatted with my director friend who wrote a play about gaming. So I thought because this is November when everyone else is doing NaNoWriMo, but I'm too lazy to write a novel. So instead, I do NovGMber, where instead of writing every day, I come up with some ridiculous gaming adventure prompt per day. It's my fetch. I'm trying to make it happen. Not a lot of folks are interested in joining me in it, but that's okay because I'm having fun.
I like it.
But I'm trying to think. We did Microphones of Madness, I think, a handful of times. We played some D&D over there. I ran a ridiculous Numenera game, which you were
It's true. I just found my sheet for that when I was packing up things. I was like, oh man, are we ever going to play this again? Probably not. So I think I might have recycled it, which is probably the wrong choice. But
well, that's okay. We can find some way to come back into that at some point. I am very, well, what's the term I should employ for this? I'm very loose with my affections when it comes to games. I will go out, get a game, be in love for like a week, spend more money than I should, play it if I'm lucky once, and then never see it again.
yeah.
I'm definitely like gaming promiscuous, and I feel like there's a lot of folks out there who can understand that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. About some of my, I have over here some of my loves, some of which I've played more than once, some of which I have barely played. But we're in an era of thinking about the world, perhaps feeling disappointment about the state of the world, being wistful about things that might have been. But I wanted to kind of look back on gaming in a similar vein. I'm now in my mid 30s, and I've been gaming for pretty much an even 20 years. I did a little bit of gaming before high school, but like just sort of toe wetting. When did you come to gaming?
Well, it's interesting. Like I'm much less promiscuous than you when it comes to gaming. Like I almost exclusively play Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay First Edition, just because that's my life and my weird fate. But I've played that. I've been in at least one Warhammer game for a solid decade at this point.
That is amazing.
I have never not had an ongoing Warhammer game for 10 years of my life, which is like a really weird thing to think about. But
that's fantastic.
It's really strange. They're not all the same either. They've come and gone. The longest one I think lasted almost 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it was long, but I mean, like for a long time, I lived in a different state than my GM, and so it was like once or twice, maybe a year we'd play. So when I say 7 years, it wasn't like every week for 5 hours. It was, but it's still, like absence and makes the heart grow fonder and all that. And so, no, you can't eat my. Okay, but I was like, oh, I should have brought my Warhammer game upstairs, and I can go get it, but that would be bad podcasting or whatever this is. So, can you just? Okay, no, you're out of here.
Bye, Toad. We'll miss you.
He got rejected. So yeah, my first introduction to gaming though was not favorable. Where I played D&D once. The only D&D I've played has been much more recent in my life, and I was totally turned off to gaming. Oh, that's not true. Can I tell my weird why I never did role playing game story?
Please.
Okay. So I got freaked out by role-playing games in early high school, maybe even 8th grade, I can't remember, because a girl at my so I went to a public high school, but it was an exclusive arts magnet high school, which the intersection of public high school and arty kids was like really great. And except for this one girl who scared the pants off me coming to school with bandages around her wrists that were not clean either. They were soaking through with her blood because during a really intense game of Vampire the Masquerade, they decided to chew on each other's wrists and really try to drink each other's blood. And I was like, it's all real. All the pamphlets. Holy shit. It's
Jack
true.
Chick was right.
Like, I'll be, yeah, the chick tracks were right. Like, no. And I was just like, whoa, too real. And so I never played in a role-playing game all through high school, except for one, and then in college, when I was studying abroad, my professor person who was there had a gaming group back in America, and he wanted to play Dungeons & Dragons and ran a really crappy session. And so yet again, I was like, this sucks. This is for nerds. Like, and it's like, here's me who's read like at least 18 Xanth books, all of the, like, I mean, like, I'm a fucking nerd, but like, I was just like, too real. This sucks. This is nuts. Like he did like a creepy, like he did voices, but I was unprepared for that emotionally because I kind of didn't want to be there. I was just humoring him because he seemed lonely for home. And so it was really awkward and strange. And I hated it. And so, like, God, that must have been 2002. And then in 2009, I got involved in 2008. I got involved in 2007, over 10 years, for 11 years. In 2007, I got involved in Warhammer, and I have not been without a game since. So
fantastic.
That's great.
What was it? Just the people with Warhammer? Was the lore? I mean, were you playing the tactical board game, or like what was it about Warhammer?
Warhammer fantasy role play, pencil and paper, like the grimdark cousin, like the dirtbag grimdark cousin of Dungeons and Dragons. I met a bunch of well, I don't want to say guys, and that it is actually gendered though. It was mostly men who were playing Warhammer, and I started playing a character, and I really liked it, and then got involved in another game, and weirdly, that was back in Florida, but since then, my GM from the old days has migrated to Colorado, and we're still friends, and he's still running a Warhammer game that has been ongoing for over 2 years, and he let me know when we were hanging out the other day that he didn't want to rush things with this game. And I was like, well, I don't feel rushed. We've been playing it like since 2016. And he was like, yeah, I know, but like, I mean, don't worry. Like, if this was like a trilogy of films, we just ended the first one. And I was like, what? Like, really? Because like, I mean, it's a great game. I play like a evil witch, basically. She is now evil and has done some terrible things, just really outlandish. And I thought that so right now what we're doing in the game is so my former master, who I put to sleep with a spell and then stole his stuff and ran away because he was not cool, and then joined this adventuring group. His friend, who always used to come and see me, and I wouldn't have to get naked, but like close to it, and he would have to like inspect me at times. And it was really weird and creepy. And it turns out that what had happened was I'm actually one of I don't know what they are, but I'm one of the simulacra. And but the guy that's sort of in charge of this is this dude named Zabralich, and he's not cool. He lives in a black tower somewhere bad, and we're going after him, like me and my home dogs. And I was like, oh man, I can't believe the game's been thrown into endgame already. It's only been 2 years. But he was like, no, like, don't worry. And I was like, oh, so I guess we have 4 more years ahead of us of intermittent gaming on this game.
Well, that's what I find really fascinating about like trying to plan games. Like anytime I've sort of sat down and be like, all right, this is the game I'm going to plan. Like I'm going to have an arc and a storyline, and it's going to like go from here to here to here. that game will not happen. If I just tell people, all right, we're gonna show up and I'll try to maybe plan something 5 minutes before, that's the game that will last, a year or two. I think in all my time of playing D&D, I think I've been in an entire campaign maybe twice.
Oh wow.
I think once in college, we played through the entire Witchfire trilogy, which is a fantastic pre-written adventure, which is part of the Iron Kingdoms world, which is my absolute favorite Dungeons and Dragons setting. Although now it's no longer Dungeons and Dragons; it's its own thing. This, by the way, is I brought this to represent it because this is the Monsternomicon, which is one of the greatest just gaming supplements out there, just full of like beautiful art and lore and just all sorts of. Anyway, it's fantastic. Like this book alone was worth getting into the setting. But we played through the whole Witchfire trilogy, which is this beautiful award-winning game. It just like takes you on this journey where you're like going to explore a town and like, oh, you need to go check out this grave, and you get swept up in this massive like 1,000-year like struggle between good and evil. And that was fantastic. And like we played through it and we loved it. And the GM was like, do you guys want to keep playing? We're like, yeah, we're gonna keep playing. And then we did this kind of like interlude game, which was all based on, I found out later, like a Final Fantasy game, like sort of a section from a Final Fantasy game.
Which Final Fantasy?
I think 6.
By the American numbers or the Jap? I'm sorry, that's the nerdy.
The one with Kefka and Dark Kefka and like
and Terra.
I think so. Yeah. I think that's the one. When I actually played this game, I named all the characters after. I'm one of those people who renames characters in role playing games. Yeah. So I renamed them all after Dragon Ball Z characters. So I'm like, it's the one with Piccolo and Goku. Oh, nice. I think Shadow the ninja with a dog, is that 6?
Yeah,
anyway.
That's the one that I'm obsessed with.
There we go. Okay, so like our GM was likewise obsessed with this, and so
it's great. That's why.
So we did. So the opera, there's like a whole like opera sequence.
Of course.
Yeah. So he had us redo that. And we're like, okay, I don't know what this. Okay, sure. I guess we're doing this opera sequence. Yes, and playing all the music from it. But then and we're like, okay, well, this is kind of neat. Like, we'll keep doing this. But then, like, he just sort of went off the rails, and we were doing like this. We were just going. We left the setting. He was like, "There's another continent you can go explore." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. I guess we'll go explore the continent." And we stopped doing cool Monsternomicon like dark fairy steampunk stuff, and just began fighting monsters in the like DMG, like the dungeon, or it was the Monster Manual 3. Just generic kind of D&D stuff. And the whole thing was just like, really? Okay.
You say that's kind of what happens when they discover another continent in Final Fantasy.
I guess.
I loved that game.
So that was like, but we played through that. We played through the whole thing of that. And then when I moved to Toronto, I joined a gaming group, and I got to play one of my absolute favorite characters, Rasmus Stormreaver, who was a drunken elven fighter who claimed to be the father of all half elves. And had this like just really janky, gross, rusted sword. And as I leveled up, instead of getting like new weapons, I just asked the GM to like find ways and excuses to like clean the sword, so you could discover that there was like gems and runes, and it was this super cool, powerful, magical sword. It's just he had not taken care of it, and so it was all janky at the start. That was a lot of fun, and that ended very like we had a big concluding game and like killed a demigod and all sorts of stuff, and that was a really fun thing to go through. But other than that, I aside from one Star Wars game that I ran start to finish in grad school, that's it. Like, I've joined a lot of games and been in games for like the middle of them and started a lot of games, but very seldom finished them. And certainly never really had the opportunity to do like a full like multi-year campaign like that. Something I would like rub my hands in gleeful anticipation of.
Yeah, no, I mean, the first one that I was in lasted a couple of years, but the one that lasted for so long was actually the characters showed up in the ill-fated game that I tried to run for Microphones of Madness.
Oh yeah, I had a lot of fun playing the world's most cleric.
You weren't even a cleric, bro. You were like
I'm
a
sorry.
pre-cleric. Yeah.
Sorry. Yes. The
Pre-cleric,
like bad like acolyte.
You had like sweep. That was your stuff.
I had expeditious retreat. I very purposefully
that's
took
true.
that.
You definitely. Toad, what? Okay, no. I told you you're rejected. So yeah, no, like I played this. She was a noble to start. Her starting career was noble, which is warrior class and Warhammer. And
yeah, so I guess folks should know with Warhammer, like you don't start off being like a fighter or a wizard or a cleric. You start off like being a chimney sweep or
a profession. Like, yeah, you have a profession, and then they fit into certain classes. Like there is a rogue class, a warrior class, a ranger class, and an academic class. But academic could be anything from wizard's apprentice to like you, who were like, I sweep the steps at the monastery, and maybe there are arcane secrets. Or a scribe, and it's so yeah. You have careers rather than archetypes, I guess, and so Corvinia, who is this priestess of Mor, who is the death god. He is the god of like ravens and death, and hates vampires, and is like he's not like a buzzkill, but he's definitely like the somber, like, yes, you will pass and never become a zombie, and it's like, thanks, Mor. So it's pretty serious. But she was so creepy that they sent her on a quest to, like, she was too into it. She was like she was just like, yes, this is my calling. And they're like, well, why don't you relax? You could have dinner. She's like, no, like death is waiting. And they're like, oh, okay. So they sent her to Sylvania, which, I mean, you can guess what it's like just based on the name, and to like fight vampires until she died. And she was like, cool. And so went and became this ultimate badass, where she, like, at one point, and she went up with some homies against a team of skeletons that were standing atop a ziggurat, casting a spell forever. And
like you do.
Yeah, like as one does, right? And they were there, and they were just like in the woods. But at the time, I was joined by this like witch hunter who was like a crazy person. Like, that was the other player character, was Jasper Prim, witch hunter extraordinaire, who was like an initiate of Sulkin, who's like the god of hard asses. He's like a god of law. and his acolytes do not carry holy water, but rather holy oil, because it burns.
Nice. Well done.
Yeah. And he was crazy and had been resurrected after like all these terrible things had happened. And like we were teamed up. And so it was me and this witch hunter who had like a magic sword and all this crazy stuff. And then basically, and I don't know if all the Ask Lovecraft listeners will know who the power team is, but the power team is this group of like hardcore Christian dudes who get really strong for Jesus. And then they perform like feats of strength for God. But it's sort of like wrestling. Like they do it publicly. Like, you can find videos, and they do things like they tear phone books in half for God. And they do other, like a breakout, like carry heavy logs and stuff. And it's like all like, you know what? Whatever.
I can imagine.
Yeah, it's very weird. But they were the power team, but for Sigmar, who's sort of like that's
Warhammer Jesus.
It's Warhammer Jesus, and it's like the Holy Roman, the Sigmarian lands are like the Holy Roman Empire. And so they were these like Sigmar guys, and they were with us. And we fought a team of skeletons who were like channeling dark energy atop a ziggurat in the middle of the worst swamp. And but the problem was I had hatred of undead, and so I couldn't like if I saw an undead, I was just like, no, you are an abomination. And so I failed my willpower check, and I was like, we ride, and like ran up the ziggurat to like mess with the skeleton. I had like a two-handed halberd that the blade was a sharpened raven with its wings spread. And so I would like just like cut, because I was warrior class, so I could wield a two-handed edged weapon, right, for God. And so I was just like murdering these skeletons. And so they all joined me, and we ended up like messing up their day. But the problem was they had been set by some necromancer atop the ziggurat to keep a chaos dragon confined.
Oh no. Wah, wah.
And so it escaped. And we couldn't stop it.
And that is a nice GM move. Well done. No,
we unleashed an unspeakable evil into the world in the service of like messing up 8 skeletons. And it was really great. And I got this.
Okay, was the GM like planning on that? Did the GM assume you would take out these skeletons so we could unleash this thing? Or was this just like a piece of like, oh, like I know this is in the lore, I'm going to include this, they'll see it and be creepy and then go on to the regular mission? Or now he's like, oh crap, now I got to deal with this chaos dragon.
Like, I don't know. I don't want to accuse my longtime 11-year friend and compatriot and longtime GM of railroading a bit, but like we all do it, right? And so he definitely put it there knowing that someone would fail a willpower check.
Well, it's just it's a shiny object, and you can sort of assume that players are going to run after a shiny object.
Sure, yeah.
I'm a terrible railroader. Like, I mean, I acknowledge that as a GM. Like, I have literally like drawn maps where it's like these two doors, one left, one right, and then they just meet back up.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But like, I definitely
like a good idea.
The worst thing I ever did, and I genuinely feel bad about this, but I was playing my Star Wars game, not this version, although I do love West End Star Wars, and Monsternomicon is great, but the old West End Star Wars Imperial source book is probably my favorite gaming supplement of all time. Check it out. It's nothing but org charts. It's beautiful.
Nice.
But I was running a D20 Star Wars game, and I got kind of like weirdly bored and wanted my players to be in the Star Frontiers universe for a while, which was like a TSR sci-fi setting.
Okay, sure.
So I needed to like get them like trapped in the Star Frontiers land. And so to do that, I exploited out of game tension between the players. And like got them all like paranoid about each other and kept like giving passing secret notes and having like secret meetings with people and like knowing that because this one player didn't like and didn't trust this other player, like their characters wouldn't like communicate and share the secret information. It was bad. And like definitely people were still talking with each other after that game, but it was a rough go.
For gaming? That's dope. Yes. Good for you.
I take this very seriously.
Art. That's real art right there.
And this is the same game. So this was my same Star Wars game where I couldn't sleep one night. I was like, you know what? I'm going to play some Silent Hill 2. And played Silent Hill 2 at like 3 a.m. Super creepy horror role-playing game. And was inspired to create what I still think is one of my best gaming sessions of all time, where I essentially took my Star Wars players into a nightmare hellscape for a game. And it was beautiful. It was great. And like, I have had genuine positive feedback about this. I did not exploit out of character knowledge. Well, okay, that's not true. I did target the most like power gamey, like super rules lawyer twink character and have a giant spider with delicate female hands at the end of its legs implant eggs into him, like sort of right at the beginning, just to like set the tone. Like, you now have eggs in you. And so for like the rest of the game, he was like, guys, I have eggs in me.
That sucks for him.
It was great. It was fantastic. And that game, actually, we came to a conclusion. We actually that's one of the few games that I think that might be one of the only games that I have run as a GM from like character creation to actual like, well, we're done, guys. As opposed to being like, can we meet on Wednesday? Nope. All right. I guess this game is over forever.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, like with the game I'm in now where I played this evil witch and my party's actually pretty cool right now. So like, so Johanna is a evil witch and she's after the Zaberlich guy because he's bad news.
Sure.
But like her compatriots are like I sometimes forget that he's like 17. I guess he's 20 now because he spent 2 years in an alternate war world where he aged 2 years and had 2 years of battle and leveling up. But we just saw him go into a magic painting and then come back out again with like a beard. Like, what year is it? Like, yeah, that's the year I've seen.
That's very Jumanji.
It was great. Yeah. So him, like this ultimate warrior guy who is like, he actually has like a championship, like a wrestler. Like he has recently converted from the Sigmarian faith to that of, what is that god's name? I don't know. He's like the god of like wolves and Vikings and honorable battle, and like he's
So
such
Schmoden, just like
yeah, Schmoden. Yeah, it is Schmoden. It's like not, and he's so boring, and it's just like, oh, what about honor this time? And like, yeah, sure, whatever. And it's, Johann is not cool with it, and so he can't wear armor anymore because now he's a berserker. But he does have a championship that looks like the WWE championship. That it can it if it like an arrow or a spell is fired at him, it like tink hits the belt. Like that's its power. And so he has this like girdle or whatever. So that's Aldo. But he has this, he's the only semi-responsible one among us. So this 18-year-old kid who was like raised by mercenaries and then like got hooked up with us for various reasons is sort of in charge, which sucks for him. Oh, he recently got a mutation where his there's a face on his back, like a horrible man's face.
Okay.
And it's actually, if you, and I figured it out, like it's, so in Warhammer, there's 2 moons. There's Morslib and Manslib, and one of them is evil, and it has a weird like face in it. And it when it's in the sky, things are going to be bad. And it's that face that's on his back. We don't know why yet, but sometimes it like hums to him, which is really bad. And sometimes it belches forth toxic smoke that is not toxic to Aldo, but will definitely kill the rest of us. So that's bad. So that's him. And I mean, it's also bad. I have 22, no, I'm sorry, 24, including my own eyeballs.
Oh, right.
Mine match.
Why wouldn't
you?
But
I have 22 other discrete eyeballs all over my body that they're all different. And through them, I can once a day scry. This was all a result of some guy that gave us mutations. It was not our fault. We did not tamper with chaos. Is
this Nurgle or Zinch coming at you?
No, this was like basically like a Cthulhu. Like this guy was like, we're not sure who he was, but he became like a chaos champion, and we fell within a circle of some spell, and so all of us got a weird mutation. And like, so Britt, who's our DPS, she's our rogue, who's been having some problems. She now can split into 6 of herself.
Okay.
Small
sure
versions. If she gets scared, it just happens, which is bad if you're in a town. But she can also do it at will. And they all just, but it's Brits, so they just like all high five one another and are like, hey, and like scamper away like those bad guys from like what's that vampire movie, that full moon one, Subspecies? Like those guys. That's how I imagine them.
Sure.
Yeah, don't watch it. And then she's great. She's rogue. She'll just kill you. She's learning firearms right now, which is pretty badass. And then there's Kieran, who's like our friend Teddy, who is playing just like an evil poisoner, basically. And his problem that he got from this monster man is that like how did David explain it? Like it's a part of him, but not. Okay. But inside of him lives a pure white spider. Like a big one too, like bigger than my cat. And it's just there. It's part of him. It's not, it's like, it's such a part of him. It's like, it's always been there, like an organ, like a kidney that he was born with, right? It's like intrinsic to him, but he can like vomit it out, this giant white spider. And then it can also do damage. Okay. And it can poison people, and he can milk it for its venom to make poisons. But then it definitely has to get naturally. So yeah, it's a pretty great. We are a team of weirdos at this point.
This is pretty fantastic. Like, I mean, I love D&D. I love the D&D. I love like the familiarity of D&D. I, will like when stressed, I will just pull out a player's handbook and just like make characters. Like that is a thing that I just do.
Oh, nice. We have our methods of coping.
I feel like my like youth spent just like making tons of GURPS characters is why I actually am pretty good at doing my own taxes now. I'm able to like use like, cross-reference and do point buys pretty well. But like, this is bonkers, Molly. This is like, I mean, I'm fairly familiar with like Warhammer and Warhammer weirdness, and this seems like a step beyond.
I mean, that's how we kind of roll.
Nice.
That's not my only mutation either, those eyeballs. Like I also have I have one of my feet is like it's not just that it's a lizard's foot. It's also that
it's a lizard.
It's like a clawed dragon's foot, but it's like porcelain.
Oh, why not? Sure. That makes sense. Why,
There's that, and I also have a vestigial tail, which I forgot about once, and like somebody saw me getting into a bath, and that was like, "When'd you get that?" And I was like, "Oh, that sucks." So it's a
That is
living, you know.
that is fantastic.
I'm a demonologist. Like I have a. This game is really great. It's just been going on for so long, but yeah, I'm no longer a demonologist. I switched from like demonologist until battle magic wizard level 3. I'm like a super badass at this point.
Sure.
And I can throw like fireballs and I can do all this crazy stuff, but I also have bound to my service like a demon steed that will do other things for me sometimes, like chores, not like groceries, but like I once gave it like a guy to eat.
Okay, yeah, that'll
Because
make
like
sense.
it was easier than getting rid of him some other way. And like
the closest thing this reminds me of is a bizarre GURPS fantasy game I did. Also, I think, was it grad school? I think it was right after I finished grad school, before I moved up to Toronto. A friend of mine was running, a friend who actually ran a bunch of like weird, really disturbing Warhammer fantasy role-playing games for me when we were in middle school. And like, it was like 2 of us at sleepovers exploring weird things late at night. But through Warhammer.
yeah, sounds like Warhammer.
But we were playing this game, this weird fantasy game, and by weird I mean weird. Like at one point, like we spent an entire session turned into cows by these bovinomancers, and we had to like argue philosophically why it was better to not be a cow. It was, yeah. But my character for that was one of my most memorable guys I ever made, Swinder Toad. I still remember his name, like 12 years later. He was like a mob surgeon. Like he was, he was a veterinarian.
Cool.
But the mob, like, used for like patching up his guys. But he was also like quasi necromantic. So he was, piecing people together, but he didn't believe in magic. He believed everything he was doing was very scientific, and had like, I took like the biggest amount of like phobia in magic. So anytime any of our spell casting like characters cast magic, I just ran away. He did not like being turned into a cow, let me tell you. But yeah, at one point I just used a bunch of my points to buy an assistant, because in GURPS you can, it's a point system. So as you get points, you can spend them into things. So it's like, now I have this like cool axe, like now I can fly. And I was like, I want one of my horrible abominations to now like be my bodyguard. And so like I had Alice, this like stitched together Frankenstein creature that like only spoke in half remembered nursery rhymes. It was fun.
That's great. That's really awesome. Yeah, no, companions are so great in games. Like I really like the way I got my demon steed, which like I usually summon it to be a horse, but I also have summoned it to be a giant wolf at one point, which for a reason, which was a good one. And Ulrich, that's that god's name. He's such a killjoy. Ulrich is the god of wolves and winter and battle and fighting and being a boring killjoy. So like it's great, but it was like given to me because I did a service for a demon named Gideon, who like I got involved with. Actually, he was the servant of that guy I was talking about who gave me the mutations. It was his pet demon.
Oh snap.
But Gideon hated it. He was like, this guy's a douche. And I was like, well, screw him then. Like I'll set you free. And he was like, cool, thanks. And so I did, which was probably a bad mistake. But I refused to kill an entire town's worth of people in his name.
I mean, fair.
But I did snake. I don't think Adam/Aldo, who plays the warrior, knows that I did this. But like I snaked the kill shot on this bad guy because like Aldo believed he had to kill him in Ulrich's name. And I was like, we're totally doing that. And then I killed him, and I like vowed that it was to Gideon that I did this. So I snaked the kill spiritually and actually from our tank.
Dang, that is cold.
It is cold, but I did get this demon steed out of it, and it was pretty cool. And Gideon and I are still cool. Like he's helping me in ways that are probably not what I think they are, and that's great. That's fine. He appears to me in the form of like a giant 5-legged purple cat. It's pretty cool. So I love that guy. In the games, in the Sylvania game where I was playing Corvinia, the priestess of Mor, I had an associate named Krieg, who had been withered by he was just sort of like this quiet guy whose tongue had been cut out by my church. and he was a Raven guard, and he was supposed to guard like holy priests of Moor, right? And so he was doing his duty when he became bound to my service after his master was killed in a battle against these mutants. But like he became mine, and he was like just in black armor, and he had a halberd, and he did not speak, for his tongue had been cut out, and then like a necromancer hit him with a spell that withered him, so he became like a corpse inside his black armor.
Good. Okay.
And it sucked for him. And but then
obviously,
yeah, he's not cool with it. But it was one of the greatest moments of GMing in that game. My favorite thing was like, so we found this spring that was dedicated to Shalia, the priestess of healing and being good, I guess, and whatever. And so we bathed in it, and like Corvinia, something was wrong with her, and it got taken away, and that was great. I forget what it was, but it sucked. But poor Krieg, like healed, but it only restored his tongue, but not his body. So he was still withered like a corpse, but he could finally speak. And I was like, "Oh, hi, Krieg. How's it going?" Yeah.
Oh, I remember Krieg. Yeah, Krieg showed up in this game with our
Krieg and Corvinia both showed up. They were great. They were inseparable. They ended the game together.
Oh, very nice. Well done.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have a question about GURPS. GURPS is the generic universal role-playing system. It was Steve Jackson of Steve Jackson Games role-playing system, I should say. It had bajillion settings. Pretty much he designed it to be this like super modular system so that you could do fantasy with it. You could do sci-fi. You could do superheroes. I'm not going to try to dig for them, but I from here can see my GURPS Discworld book I have, which is like falling apart, but is fantastic. GURPS of Vorkosigan Saga. I've like over the years, like just acquired all different stuff. I mean, it was a great way to sell books because you could just be like, here's this base game, which again, it's all point buy. So you like, decide how strong you want to be. Are you like an 100-point team, or are you like a 1,000-point team? Like his Munchkin game. I don't know. Munchkin, I assume more with like Hackmaster and things like that. I haven't ever played the role-playing game. I think there's a Munchkin role-playing game. Yeah, it was all points by, but it was also so crunchy because he wanted to make this like system that like anyone could use. It was just so fiddly, like every little thing. Like it's not as bad as Hero System. Hero System was the like really hardcore. Like if you want to be able to punch someone, you need to buy like a punch attack and decide how much damage your punch does. And yeah, like I did a little bit of Hero System once, and it made me have a bit of a headache. But yeah, GURPS was so fun for making characters too, because you could just like, you sat down, you had this blank sheet. It had like kind of this androgynous, like grayed out, figure for you to draw on to like, and you just could run with it. And you could be like, what do I want to make? I want to make, a flying guy who's part plant, who has amnesia and no foot. And because like, because it was point buy, you sort of were like, okay, I want to have all these cool things. And if I take disadvantages and like penalize myself, then I have more points to play with. So you would wind up with like weird characters who have like, they're like a cool super Viking warrior with like a squint who's like haunted by his mother-in-law. And it was, yeah, because you could just, whatever you could think of, chances are, especially if you had the, the right bonus compendium, you could create it and you could run with it. I ran superhero games with it, which were a lot of fun. I did one of my many first sessions of a Discworld game. Yeah, it was for me, what I loved more than just playing it was just like looking around it and trying to like imagine a character and see it come to life via the rules. Like there were just rules for absolutely everything. Yeah, so that's GURPS. It was good times.
Yeah, it's cool.
The games that I've acquired and have tried to play many times. This one is probably one of my biggest white whales, Burning Empires. Make sure I had that the right way. If folks are aware of Luke Crane and the Burning Wheel, which this system is based off of, also Mouse Guard, a game where you play as little mice running around trying to like save their mice communities. Luke Crane was someone who I think really sort of saw Dungeons and Dragons, was attracted to it, but like also hated it. And so try to find a system that could do all the things that Dungeons and Dragons couldn't do. And and avoided some of the traps within Dungeons and Dragons. And I think for the most part, he's been very successful. He's done some really cool creative things. I think other times he gets really, really, really crunchy and really deep and sort of love of his mechanics, and they can get really intense. Like, he hated the fact that, there was all this really intense combat, rules and rules for combat and like hitting people. But why couldn't you have a similar system for doing like social combat, like arguing and debating and like convincing people? Usually that comes down to just like rolling 1d20. But for him, like he made like combat level complexity for conversations. So, they're like, it reminds me a lot of the Phoenix Wright lawyer games, where it's just like objection, riposte, it's all this back and forth, very intense rules for having arguments. But this was ridiculous because not only was this, taking his like intense, super crunchy gaming rules, but it was applying this to the Iron Empire's comic book setting, which is a really cool comic book. It's sort of Warhammer 40K-ish in that it's like a far future. Mankind has forgotten a lot of its technology, and there's like sort of a medieval religion surrounding a lot of the technology. And into this kind of fallen world come body snatching worms, and the body snatching worms are infiltrating and trying to take over humanity. And so in the game, you play, the first thing you do is you make a planet. There's a thing called world burning, where you create a planet. And like, based on the decisions you make, like, is your planet mostly water? What are the exports of the planet? How religious is your planet? What factions are on your planet? You get, there are mechanical effects to it. Like, it's not just fluff. There's this whole, like, you're sort of creating the hit points for the world. And then you all make your characters, and your characters are meant to be the big movers and shakers. So like the high priests and the dukes and the generals and the, leader of the rebellion. And, you set up like your relationships and your conflicts and what's going to happen. And then the GM introduces body snatching worms, and the players have to like deal with their own like issues and goals and ambitions and loves and drives. But their planet is being taken over by worms, and maybe they know, maybe they don't know, but their actions are impacting this, this conflict, so if they, take out the general because the general is, corrupt and a tyrant, but the general was like one of the few people who knew how to stop the worms, it creates all this level of intrigue. And like, there's almost a board game element to it. Like, between sessions, you're like rolling dice to see how well the aliens are doing and how like is the planet getting taken over. It is super crunchy, super dense, super ridiculous. And I have not gotten out of character creation. Like I got people to sit down. We made a really cool like planet that was essentially a glorified brothel. It had been like this, great. It had been this like great like destination planet, like a 1,000 years ago, but like had just sort of shrunk down and been economically devastated. So now it's just where people went to go to Bone Town. And yeah, it's just, you can create a lot of different settings, a lot of different worlds, and the mechanics for doing it are really cool. And the game is all about like player consensus and player buy-in. Like everyone's got to be able to like agree. So you can't just have someone just kind of dicking around and being obnoxious. Like you've got to all be able to make it work. But it is so crunchy and so ridiculous that I've never actually played it.
It sounds hard.
It's very high concept. And I think you have to have like a very specific kind of mindset for going into a game like that. Very similar to other game that I would love to try at some point, Dogs in the Vineyard. The game of being roving gangs of essentially Mormon cowboys and lawmen, like fighting demons and saving or punishing communities. It's literally that. You're just like a roving group of paladins that come to a community that has some sort of problem. Chances are there's demons, but you don't know. It could just be, someone's like having an affair, and like that's like destroying the community. And the whole thing is done with playing cards. You use playing cards to determine like what's going down. And then my final weird high concept game is one that I've actually had a chance to play and is fantastic. And that is Cold City, which is essentially Hellboy, like the Hellboy, like BPRD set in 1950 Berlin. So World War II has ended. All the various allied occupying regions are in Berlin, but oops, Nazis were like experimenting with demons and monsters and like opening portals they probably shouldn't have been. So there's a secret policing agency that's trying to quietly clean this up. And everyone is part of it, but they can't be part from the same country. So you have to have like an American agent and a Russian agent and a French agent and maybe even a German agent. And, you have your missions that you get from, about like, oh, there's SS werewolves still running around Berlin. But then you'll have your nation's agenda. So America will be like, we need to find a way to cure these werewolves. So make sure to bring them in alive. And the, Soviets are like, we need the blood samples so that we can create these werewolves. And the French are like, you need to destroy all evidence because it's our technology that allowed for these werewolves to even exist. So get rid of like any trace of it. And so all the players like have to work together until suddenly they're not working together. And it's got trust and betrayal mechanics. Like you literally write down how much you trust other players and like get bonus dice based on that. But if they ever betray you, they get a whole whack load of dice.
Oh man.
And I actually did get a chance to play this a bit in Toronto before I left. And it's a whole lot of fun. Like if folks are looking for like really cool espionage, really like cool just team dynamics, like we would play these games and solve the main crisis. Like they, figured out what was going on with the zombies or discovered the Hitler golems or, what have you within like an hour. And then the next like hour and a half was just them debating what to do. Like what are the ramifications of us destroying this creature or like turning it over to our authorities? Or, it's great for a GM to just be able to sit back and watch a lot of story happen without having to actually be like pushing them and make it happen.
Have you ever played a game called Dread?
Oh, no, but I want to. That's the one with the Jenga tower, right?
I know the guy who made it.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
And I just remembered because we reconnected on Twitter, but like a million years ago, he was on this vegans forum that I was on back in the early days of 2006. And he like won an award for Dread. And I just remembered this because like I found him on Twitter and I was like, oh my God, it's Epi. He designed Dread. It's that guy from the Post-Punk Kitchen forums. And like, I was just thinking about it when you were talking about the playing card rules. I was like, what was the name of that Jenga game? And I should get it. And I'm with it. So I'm starting to play with, I have like a couple gaming groups going on right now. And sadly my Pathfinder group seems to have gone away. And that was pretty cool. I played like a meathead dwarf lady.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, she was cool. She had I broke the rules because I guess in Pathfinder, lady dwarves have a beard but no mustache, but Tash had a mustache but no beard.
Ooh, okay.
She's cool. She's very vain about it. But that group's kind of fallen away, sadly. But I am in a group that like sort of regularly does different things. Like right now we're playing Vampire the Requiem.
Oh, okay.
The newer one.
Yeah.
It's cool.
More like it's more like Jesus-y. Like there's like sort of weird, like, aren't there like weird, like Christian, like vampires who are like, we must punish God or we must punish mortals for God or something?
Not in this game. This game is like a Wild West game.
Okay.
So I don't know if she's just using the system or what, RGM, nice. Or storyteller, whatever you call it. And I played with them. I played a couple of sessions of Legend of the Five Rings, which I had very mixed feelings about. Legend of the Five Rings is like, I don't know what it's fantasy Japan.
Yeah, no, I know the card game and I know the sort of the setting of it, but
yeah, I had some questions. Like I am firm in my belief that samurai are not as cool as people think they are, and so it's kind of hard for me because it is an entire game based on like what is the awesomest thing in the world of samurai, and it's like that's actually like there's very little historical evidence to support that theory. Like it's like the Enlightenment, where all the Enlightenment guys are like, we're the best, we're so dope, reason is our thing, and we look back on them and we're like, was it? And they're like, yes, and we're like, oh God, okay, let's become America because of it, and like and whatever and stuff. But like the samurai the same way, it's like Bushido is our way, and it's like none of y'all lived like that ever, so shut up. And like so it was kind of hard for me on like knowing a little bit about samurai to be like, yes, indeed, this is our way. This is like, and it's like, nah, like you're like, if this was a real samurai role-playing game, we'd be like getting drunk in a tavern, sexually harassing someone, and like murdering someone for like petty reasons of honor that we then make up a story about it being cooler than it was. But that's like not, and if that was the game, like problematic, but legit, whereas this one was just like, I mean, it was really fun. I enjoyed playing it, but I kind of had this sort of like,
I mean,
Eh,
what you're describing sounds more like role-playing games I've been in, right? Like it's very seldom Knights of the Round Table and more
no,
just like,
yeah.
oops, we set the bar on fire.
Yeah, and no, and I like that sort of thing. I like when things go sideways, but like you're constrained by honor and social standing in Legend of the Five Rings, which I really struggled with because I was just like, I'm do this, and it's like, no, you can't. You're a samurai, and it's like, is this supposed to be teaching me a lesson about samurai? Because I don't think so. Because it's not
Well,
saying
it
I can't do
also
this
like, is
thing.
it also like weirdly kind of like Orientalist and like, ooh,
I'm
this sort of
like
exotic
I guess
other?
I felt that way, and I don't know who wrote it or designed it, and I don't know anything about it. And if Japanese people designed it and like that, like, okay, but I just got it was a very like the Last Samurai. Like I felt.
I know,
I
I
mean, I
know,
don't want to get in trouble on the internet for saying this, but like I just felt it was like a little like Saeed called. He wanted his Orientalism back, like and I'll modify my like I don't know I don't want to be disrespectful. I had a lot of fun playing it, but I thought it was a little. I thought it had notions of samurai that were not rooted in fact. I'll
no,
just
that's
put
fair.
it that way.
No,
Like,
I mean, and I remember the card game, and the card game is very just like, ah, it's a crab monster, like,
yeah,
oh, like it's
and that's
very
cool. Yeah,
weird and sort of
dope.
fantasy, and like there's some sort of Kurosawa in there, but mostly it's like swords and crabs.
Yeah,
Um, and I
yeah.
think, I think if you go into a game knowing sort of like, okay, we are playing a genre thing,
Mhm.
we are doing like a pulp thing. Things are going to get weird and pulpy. We're going to be doing a weird Warhammer's lots of eyes and porcelain dragon feet game.
Whatever. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I think that could covers multitude of sins. I'm really excited to see how like essentially notions of consent are entering gaming in much cooler
Mhm.
ways and much more explicit ways. And
I think
people,
that's good too. Right.
well, I think it gives you permission to do weird things. Like I feel like every time I've gotten into a real fight with a GM or a fight with a player, it's because there's this like thwarted sense of expectation. Like I'm imagining this kind of game, they're imagining that kind of game. I'm essentially running like what I think is going to be paranoia, and they're imagining,
Yeah.
Call of Cthulhu. And there can be some intersection of Call of Cthulhu and paranoia.
Mhm.
But if you're not on the same page and you're not like explicitly saying like this is the kind of game I want, I now do that. I now just say like, all right, guys, like get out a sheet of paper. Like, what do you want there to be in this game? Like, do you want there to be
Oh,
dragons? Do you want there to be undead? Do you want there to be like a real sense of like actual impending death, or more like playful violence? Do you want more like dark fantasy or more like light fantasy, or kind of Conanic, heroism while you're stealing stuff?
yeah. I that reminds me. I played a game called Microscope recently that had
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
and that
Microscope
was
is
really
fantastic for
cool.
that.
Yeah, it was really neat. Like we ended up doing, like we agreed that in that like that. Oh, because I was the first time player, so I get to have a bonus thing I demanded to be in the world, and so the two things. And because usually everyone gets to have one thing that has to be in the world or cannot be in the world that you're creating. And I chose that the two things that for my world would be like matriarchy and swords.
Nice.
So it was like the best night ever.
Yeah.
For me.
Microscope is a great, I mean, it's similar to this kind of world burning thing I was
Yeah.
talking about, right? It's just like sitting
That's what I was
down.
thinking about when you were talking about it.
But yeah, Microscope goes way in. Like you go and you like you sort of do like improv role playing of like historical moments or
Yeah.
conversations throughout history. It's great for creating this like, all right, now we have this world that we can play in, and there's I don't know, I think Microscope does a really good job for stuff like that.
It was really fun, and it seemed like the kind of thing that like I'm always very interested in the way that like, when you were talking about world building, this really complicated game that you're talking about, I was thinking to myself like, wow, I don't really do that much work for like my books. I felt like it's kind of a sense of shame, but like it's not my thing. That's why I write historical fantasy most of the time. Is it's just like whatever, it's London, sure, all right, let's go. And so, but I was thinking, how do people create world scenes? And Microscope seemed like a fun way of like so I will occasionally like read my tarot to sort of hack my brain, like what am I thinking about in terms of my work. It's like it's a way that I can sort of get started on a day of writing. And I felt like Microscope could be a fun thing too, or if you played it with yourself, you could figure out like the kind of world you wanted to build for a novel or something like that, which seemed like a really cool way of starting out something, because I know like the one time I tried to write a second world novel, it was a disaster. And since I'm semi contemplating trying something like that again, I'm like, what are you, dumb? Like, you had such a bad time, because it was like, how does currency work? Like, I just like, I don't like making those choices. They're hard for me. It's easier for me to do research about what actually happened and then be like, screw that, than it is to create a world that has rules that then you have to like transgress, because like all good novels come out of transgressing
Sure.
the rules of the world. And so it's just like twice the work, like, come on. And so, but no, it did occur to me that your game sounded like that too, where you could use the character creation part of it to sort of hack your brain to be like creative. And since it is also NaNoWriMo as well as no GMber, it seemed like look at me bringing the podcast, like
bringing it back. Well done.
Yeah, sure. Whatever.
I would do want to. We're beginning to come to the end of the show, so I want to tell folks about two things. First is you're going to be back on the show before too long. Scott Glancy, who was on a little while back, has agreed to run. Was it Hollow Earth Expeditions? Pulp adventure game.
Yeah.
For you, another author friend of mine, Rachel Kolar, and myself. So that's going to be coming up. I think maybe in about a month. We'll let you know. But that should be a lot of fun. I'm really excited to have Scott GM. I've seen him GMing before, and I think it'll be a lot of fun to see. It is
actually a goal of mine. Like the next time I get back to Lovecraft Film Festival, which I have vowed will be next year, I'm going to make it happen. I really want to get in a game with him and like play. It's always sort of been a goal of mine, and I always end up being busy doing weird things in Portland. But like I just was like, you should sit down and like play a game with him, because he seems like he'd be like a really bombastic GM. And I know that like we were talking about this a while ago, where when I tried to run that game, the Warhammer game for Microphones of Madness, and I was not great at it. I'm just saying that for me. I don't feel like I was fun. I'm glad that you had fun. I did not think I was doing my best. And it was only until I started listening to the Adventure Zone podcast that I realized that the GM could make things up. Like one of the problems I had with that game was I kept rolling for all of my stuff, and I'd be like, well, I guess I failed to do it. And it's like, no, you're free. Like, you don't have to do that.
That's right. The boulders can fall.
No, I know. And he said something like, this person does this cool thing. And I was like, but how could he know that? And it's like, well, because he's in charge. And I was like, oh, is that how you run games? And it just like occurred to me that anyway, whatever. Like I should have done more homework and like listened to a gaming podcast or talked to a game master before doing my own thing. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But yeah, he seems like he'd be very sort of like, no, this is what's going on. Like, go do this thing. And that I do for one-offs and short games. It is kind of nice, I feel, to be like, no, this is the direction you take it. Because often I'm just like, well, yeah, let's go check out a grocery store, man. We're in this new town. And it's like, no, that's not what. Like, it's like the thing that people have where like, so I love to role play a scene with like a tense feast where everyone's like saying things to one another. And it's like, will this erupt in violence? But like other people are like, get me out of this feast. Oh my God. And like, I'm just like, what do you want to do? Fight goblins? That's so boring. And it's like, yes, we're playing this role-playing game. Like, let's pretend we have swords that we're using to kill things. And I'm like, but we could be pretending to eat a really good dinner. And so it's like hard for me. People have the same thing in reading too, where like some people like want to know what people eat for dinner every night in a fantasy book. And other people are like, what's happening in this book? And I'm like, slow down. Like, was the bear stew good? So like, it just depends, I guess, on what you like.
No, and I think that's what I like about gaming. I like the places where you get surprised and the places where players, you know, sort of throw you for a loop. That can be very frustrating sometimes, but it can also be a ridiculous amount of fun. And that interplay between kind of like player agency, but also the GM, like, you know, curating an experience. There's just I don't know, there's a lot you can do, and there's a lot that can come out of it. So I'm very grateful you came on to let us know about your game. Let us also know about your upcoming book, Creatures of Want and Ruin.
All right. Okay, sure. I did bring them up here. So I'm in the middle of a series. The first one, we probably talked about it last time, Creatures of Will and Temper. It's Victorian London. It's picture of Dorian Gray with fencing and demons. The second is imminent. It comes out next Tuesday. And it's also pretty. And it's Creatures of Want and Ruin. It is a sequel, but it is really sort of a companion novel in that it is set 30 to 40 years later in 1927 on Long Island, New York. And it doesn't have any of the same characters, but is it really that much shorter? You know, I haven't looked at them side by side. This is weird. Sorry, I'm just exploring with y'all. Yeah, it's strangely shorter. And so yeah, it's about like a lady bootlegger who's supporting her family, like fishing by day and running moonshine by night. And she starts having problems when her father gets involved with like a para-religious organization that is sort of drumming up anti-immigrant sentiment about Long Island and is preaching sort of isolationism and like, who does Long Island belong to? It's us, not them. And her dad gets involved and she sort of has to make some hard choices. And at the same time, she also sort of ruins her life when she sells some moonshine she got after fighting like a weird dude in a boat in the rain. She sells it to these rich people, and then it gives them all visions of the apocalypse and makes the papers, and her life becomes a lot more difficult after that.
Nice.
So it's a little bit F. Scott Fitzgerald. It's a little bit H.P. Lovecraft. It's like a lot of my feelings about things, and like a lot of punching, and there's archery, and like just actually like a surprising amount of smooching. Which I've been straying away from in my more recent works, like Creatures of Will and Temper. Like it does have a blue scene, but it's very short. When like at some point my editor was like, "Can you kind of dial back the smooshing in this book?" And I was like, "Is it that bad?" And then I reread the draft and I was like, "Oh my god!" And so like yeah, but it has as much, but just like less. I don't know. I just had to like reel it in a little bit, but it is definitely like a pulp novel, and so I figured I was going to write a protagonist who like, what if some Dashiell Hammett type of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just running booze and kissing dames and doing things. Like, what if it was like a fictionalized version of my grandmother, the nature poet? And so like, yeah, that's that book.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, folks can look forward to that coming out Tuesday. Folks can look forward to our upcoming game of Hollow Earth Expedition coming up next few weeks or so. And folks can continue to follow Molly. MollyTanzer.com, still the best place for folks to see what's going down.
I guess like
you got a newsletter they can subscribe to, which I subscribe to.
The newsletter is a good way of keeping up to date. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Insta, those are public. If you would like to be my friend on Facebook, please send me a message that's like, I'm not a crazy person. I'm not here to yell at you. I saw you on a show, and I'll be like, cool, that sounds great, and I'll accept your request. But otherwise, I tend to be like,
smart.
Do you really want to be here? So yeah, like I usually prefer a letter of introduction on Facebook, just because, like, man, those threads get really long when people start yelling.
Very true.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. If folks have enjoyed this. This is Ask Lovecraft After Dark. If you don't know, I impersonate H.P. Lovecraft 3 times a week over at asklovecraft.com. You can follow me screaming into the void on Twitter at Lehman Kessler. You can find out about live shows and interviews and what's going down with me at lehmankessler.com. If you like this live show and you want to be a part of the conversation, we were hearing some interesting stories about people's characters. Someone who created a sort of character design solely to metagame and torment his GM. So there you go. That's an option. You can go and join the Facebook group, the Ask Lovecraft Appreciation Society, and you can be part of these live conversations. You can be chatting along on the sidelines, asking questions, and we always love your input. Otherwise, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you so much, Molly, for being on the show. And I'll be seeing you soon in the Hollow Earth, apparently.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic night. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.